You would never abuse power as retribution against anybody.
Except for day one. We love this guy. He says, you're not going to be a dictator, are you? I said, no, other than day one.
It probably won't surprise you to learn that in the past 72 hours, Donald Trump has said some profoundly deranged things, even for him. And predictably, the Fox propaganda network continues to ignore it, downplay it, deflect from it, or, if they're feeling particularly brave, briefly push back on it in the gentlest way possible. And into this context steps Jessica Tarlov, the one sane voice on that network who challenged Trump's words head-on on the Fox propaganda show The Five. And the way her right-wing co-host reacted was truly pathetic, even by their standards. But before we unpack all that, if you haven't yet, please hit that like, subscribe, and the alert bell. All right, folks, we have several clips to play. I'm going to start with one, which is the least recent, where Fox News does something relatively surprising. See if you catch it.
He said, we've got a red button on my desk, he said. I said, I have a red button also, but mine's bigger, better, and it works. Mine works. And then, no.
Well, the former president finally got around to some campaign promises amid lots of cheering, as you heard. Many untruths. The 2020 election was not rigged. It was not stolen.
I know. You're probably having to pick yourself up off the floor as we speak, but it is true. A Fox News anchor actually fact-checked Donald Trump and said, yeah, the 2020 election was not stolen. It was not rigged. Now, as tempted as I am to give her a standing ovation, I'm not going to, because she referred to it as an untruth when she just should have bluntly said it is a lie, especially given that her network was involved in signal boosting that lie, as we found out during the Dominion lawsuit discovery. You know, they knowingly did it, which is why they had to pay $800 million in a settlement. Now, the other two clips are much more recent from a Sean Hannity-hosted Fox News town hall. There was a lot of material there, but this is by far the most important and the most alarming.
They want to call you a dictator. You use the words, I am your retribution. And now, before that, you said if you've been wronged, and you used other words as well. But I want to be very, very clear on this. To be clear, do you in any way have any plans whatsoever, if reelected president, to abuse power, to break the law, to use the government to go after people?
You mean like they're using right now? So, in the history of our country, what's happened to us, again, has never happened before. Over nonsense, over nothing, made up charges. I often say Al Capone, he was one of the greatest of all time, if you like criminals. He was a mob boss, the likes of which Scarface, they call him. And he got indicted once. I got indicted 4 times. I wonder what my father and mother would say looking down.
So he never answered the question. Instead, he complained that he was a victim. He was cheered on by his crowd, and then he went on a completely incoherent screed. He never addressed the question. And that response was so bad that 3 minutes later, Sean Hannity, a visibly nervous Sean Hannity, redirected Trump back to that question, okay? So he asked Trump again about being a dictator, and this is how Trump responds.
We almost have to go to a break. I want to go back to this one issue, though, because the media has been focused on this and attacking you.
Yeah.
Under no circumstances. You are promising America tonight you would never abuse power as retribution against anybody.
Except for day one.
Except
Look,
for?
he's going crazy. Except for day one.
Meaning?
I want to close the border, and I want to drill.
That's
drill,
not. That's
drill.
That's not.
No, no.
That's not retribution. I got.
I'm gonna be. You know, he keeps. We love this guy. He says, "You're not going to be a dictator, are you?" I said, "No. Other than day one, we're closing the border." And we're drilling. After that, I'm not a dictator.
So that sounds to me like you're going back to the policies when you were president. All right,
exactly.
Take a break. Just getting started. We're in beautiful Davenport, Iowa.
It's so bad that a right-wing Trump apologist like Sean Hannity feels the need to try to launder and sanitize Trump's remarks. Very uncomfortable, clearly. Now, all these clips provide a context for what Jessica Tarlov on The Five addresses. And it's also important to remember her Fox News co-hosts, Jesse Waters, Jeanine Pirro, Greg Gutfeld, even Dana Perino, they don't want to talk about this. So she makes them anyway, or rather, she talks about it on Fox News airtime. So let's see what she has to say and then note how they respond.
The juxtaposition of last night, so Biden is at the fundraiser and Donald Trump is doing his town hall with Sean Hannity. And Sean was doing his best to help him out, asking questions like, hey, buddy, are you planning on being a dictator? And then he floats around, he does a bunch of things. He says he's innocent, all these indictments, he's treated worse than Al Capone, blah, blah, blah. And then he eventually gets around to just saying, no, just dictator day one in terms of what I'll do on the border, et cetera. And people hear that. And they hear, yeah, this guy still continues to be a threat to democracy. And you think to 2 days ago when Arthel Neville, our own anchor, had to beam into Trump's remarks when he said, I won the 2020 election. Doesn't stop with the lies about it. And you can say it's not the most important issue to people, but people have been voting on preserving democracy. And that's what Joe Biden's talking about, that he was the guy who got Trump out, and he's the guy who can keep Trump out.
Okay. So I imagine you would say the same about Stacey Abrams, who still is convinced that she won the gubernatorial election. But you
For
know
violent
what?
insurrection?
Stacey Abrams will not concede and never conceded that she lost the gubernatorial election. And then second time around really lost it even bigger. But look, I hope Joe sticks with the first.
So they never actually respond to anything she says. As a matter of fact, think about this. That town hall must have been terrible in even their estimation, because even though it was on their network, hosted by one of their co-hosts, or, well, fellow anchors or fellow reporters, whatever, it would actually be, it's an insult to reporters to say that Sean Hannity is one, but you understand, a fellow on-air Fox News talent. It's actually not the subject of the five at all. They talked about Gavin Newsom and other things, the Ron DeSantis-Gavin Newsom debate. The five is absolutely eager to talk about Trump because they love Trump. And yet those remarks were so incendiary, so fascistic, that they wouldn't even cover it on that episode of The Five. Jessica Tarlov had to bring it up herself, okay? And then see how Jeanine Pirro responds. I don't know if you caught it, but at one point during Jessica Tarlov's conversation, when the camera, or excuse me, her monologue, so to speak, when the camera panned back, Jeanine Pirro crossed her arms in a huff. Okay, we saw it. And then when it's her turn to talk, she says, well, what about Stacey Abrams? What about Stacey Abrams? Stacey Abrams, of course, being a two-time, unfortunately, loser for the Georgia gubernatorial race, one in 2018 and I think the other in 2020, or 2022, rather. And it's true that in the 2018 election, she never conceded. She tried to challenge the outcomes legally, and when she lost, she let it go, but she never gave a formal concession. And as we've talked about in previous videos, there was some shenaniganry afoot, given that her opponent at the time for the governorship was the state secretary of state, Brian Kemp. And there were voter roll purges and changes to aspects of the election before the election. But the bottom line is she didn't try to stage an insurrection. She has not gone on tour talking again and again and again and again and again how she actually won. There is an asymmetry here. Is what Stacey Abrams saying wrong and irresponsible? You could easily make that argument. But Donald Trump was the sitting president of the United States when he incited an insurrection on January 6th, and that's the legal opinion of the Colorado State Court. That's a matter of legal fact as far as the courts are concerned, that January 6th was an insurrection. Donald Trump was an insurrectionist by inciting it, and he was a sitting president of the United States with the highest level of national security and moral responsibility. Okay, he had more responsibility to behave himself than did Stacey Abrams, and Stacey Abrams never did anything like what Donald Trump has done. And Donald Trump still won't shut up about the 2020 election. It's not just that he believes that he won it, which actually we don't know. There apparently, according to Jack Smith's indictment against Trump, there's credible evidence to indicate that Donald Trump knows he lost the election. But it's a constant source of grievance for him. He can't go a single sentence without citing his defeat in the 2020 election. But the five, or the four out of the five, I mean, Dana Perino just said, okay, and never responded, never addressed it, never agreed, because she didn't have the facts on her side, but she doesn't have the courage to agree with Jessica Tarlov. Then that's when Jeanine Pirro steps in and says, what about Stacey Abrams? What about Stacey Abrams? So profoundly pathetic. And also note, none of them addressed the dictator comment. Jeanine Pirro summoned enough courage to hit her with a whataboutism about the election denial, but no one said a word about Donald Trump saying, I'll be a dictator, as well as the credible reports indicating that he intends to. Absolutely gross, absolutely pathetic, even by Fox News standards. Let me know what you think in the comments.